Now we're getting into season 5. We're at the tail end of this here. Tale of the Dead Man's Float. This is the episode that scared everybody. I think this is actually probably the episode that really convinced parents that this was not for children. Because what's going on here is it's a haunted swimming pool in a school where they show just enough of what happened about 40 or so years in the past to show that while the now janitor of the school was a lifeguard, he snuck his girlfriend and his girlfriend's brother into the swimming pool. The swimming pool had been built on top of a burial ground, which that's never going to go well.
No.
And they had moved all of the other spirits, but I guess they missed one. Well, this one spirit winds up haunting that swimming pool and drowning anybody who swims in it. So the girlfriend's little brother winds up drowning that night. And then we jump forward about 40 years or so into the future. And because of just the kind of setting and stuff, you don't really realize that they've jumped forward into the future at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good storytelling in its own right. This time, after that event had taken place, they had blocked off the entrance into that swimming pool. No one in that school knew at this point that swimming pool even existed. So this school having a swimming team that had to go to a public swimming pool in order to do any practice or anything like that. When they find when a very scientifically oriented kid who was kind of exploring the school a little bit at some point had found that blocked off swimming pool, it didn't take much convincing to be able to get the principal of the school to be like, oh, okay. I mean, if you find it, we'll get it cleaned up. We'll get things going. We'll fix this up. And the only evidence of this ghost ever throughout the entire thing originally is just a foul odor of like a rotting carcass, because it's invisible in the swimming pool the entire time. And it will just oftentimes just barely miss these kids as they manage to get out of the pool, not knowing that thing is haunting the pool the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
The scientifically oriented boy doesn't really know how to swim, having had a bad instance where he almost drowned when he was younger. He convinces a girl in his science class who is on the swim team to teach him how to swim, and in exchange he would help her with chemistry stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we get just a little bit of a glimpse of his knowledge of chemistry when he's bringing up some chemicals that react in such a way for a volcano.
Mm-hmm.
And this girl, the swim team girl, she actually kind of takes enough of that to memory for that to come back up later on, where the chemicals of chlorine mix with another one of these chemicals to turn anything red or to react in such a way. In this case, that invisible ghost turns red. And this is that, you probably remember it, where it was a skeleton just all in red, cloaked in red clothing and stuff like that. Do you remember seeing that?
In what?
In this episode. Do you remember that image?
Vaguely, but I don't know if I'm seeing is right.
It's one of the very most memorable villains. The Tale of the Dead Man's Float. That thing scared everybody.
You see how it's censored off my phone? Like, I literally have to open it to see it.
Yeah, really? Why'd they censor it so much? That's weird.
That's what that was from?
I mean, I don't know why it's palm size. I don't recall that ever appearing in the thing, but yeah.
That's a toy. What are you talking about?
Oh, it's a toy. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It's from that episode.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that.
Mm-hmm. And it scared everybody when they were kids. Everyone who saw that, I think everyone had nightmares that night who saw that episode. So like, ooh.
Yeah, my blur image is on for some reason. So.
That's weird. But yeah, it scared everybody, and for good reason.
Oh, safe search, that's why.
Safe search. Okay, well.
Okay, because I've seen that image before, and I just can never remember why. Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely it scared a lot of kids. It made a lot of kids not want to go swimming for a while.
You know what I'm saying? That I can see why that particular episode would probably. I'm not saying these other episodes could happen in real life. Certain of some of them.
But the fear of drowning.
But this one is very, very much more in your face. I can kind of see where my parents was like, yeah, no.
Yeah, it definitely turned people off from wanting to learn how to swim for a while, myself included. But yeah, fantastic episode, and it was the opening episode to season 5. Which would wind up being the final season for a few years. So, I mean, hell of a way to start. So, fantastic. The next one we have is The Tale of Jagged Sign, and this is another love story type one. This one actually doesn't appear too terribly high on people's radars and winds up getting ranked very low, but I think it deserves a lot more love than it gets. So this girl's aunt runs like an elder care center situation for people who are able to function for the most part, but are just not as mobile necessarily.
Okay.
But it's not to the point to where they have memory problems or anything like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So this girl is visiting her aunt, and living next door is a girl and her family, and they spend some time hanging out together. They go out to explore the woods in the surrounding area, and upon getting to a certain high place, because this visiting girl just can't leave well enough alone and is intent on exploring places that she shouldn't, sees this thing called the jagged sign that looks kind of like angel wings, if you will. It looks a lot like angel wings is what it looks like.
Okay.
And upon seeing it and nearly falling, sees the ghost of a boy who at this point we don't know much about. He comes to her late at night trying to get her to come out of the house so they can run off, because what we learn later on is that one of the elder women there at that rest home place was dating the boy at the time, way back some decades in the past when they were young. And when she was younger, she looked like the girl who is the
now person that he's trying to get.
Yes, exactly. So it's a case of mistaken identity. She never came out. Like, she wasn't going to let that happen. So the ghost leaves. The girl living next door finds a picture when the elder woman who looked like the other girl in the past, the aunt thinks that she's kind of losing her mind because she's just not seeming to be all there as much. Like, she melted a bowl on a cooking plate unintentionally and didn't seem to notice that there was a fire right in front of her.
Okay.
Stuff like that. So trying to send her off to be able to go and get better help than what she can get there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while cleaning out the room, the neighbor girl who offered help finds a picture of her and that boy, and that's how they figure out the connection between the two.
Okay.
So she and the visiting girl run and to that same location where they know they'll see this boy. They tell him, she's still waiting for you. She's there at that place, whatever. He goes, he meets up with her, and turns out that she died that day upon meeting him again after all this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they look down, and she and her boyfriend, who they were going to run off and be married, but he wasn't approved of by her family.
Okay. How come they were separated?
Because I guess she got caught in time. Well, no, actually what happened was he had climbed up there in order to paint that jagged sign, which was actually going to be an entire bird.
Mm-hmm.
He had gifted her a bird stand figurine, which she kept for all that time. I think it was a music box.
Mm-hmm.
He had gifted her a bird music box that she kept for all that time, and he was painting that bird on the cliffside as a symbol of their love. Is what
he died because he fell.
He fell. He died. He didn't get to complete it. But upon finally meeting up with her all these decades later, and then run off together, they take another look, and that sign's been completed. It's a picture of a bird.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a much sweeter, more wonderful episode than I am even remotely explaining. I'm doing a horrible job of explaining the episode. But it doesn't rank very highly on a lot of people's lists, and I don't particularly understand why, because it's a very good love story. I think maybe part of the reason is that they're just comparing it against ones like The Tale of the Prom Queen, The Tale of the Dream Girl, that are just...
It's 5 seasons in, and at this point, some of them is starting to feel a little bit more repetitive with different characters.
Yes. And because The Tale of the Dream Girl really just knocked it out of the park, I feel like that may be why this episode is not that highly ranked, because it doesn't compare by comparison.
To the other ones, yeah.
Yes. It's still a great episode and deserves to be loved a lot more than it's getting. It just... I don't know. It deserves better love than it's getting. The same is true of The Tale of the Prisoner's Past. This one's honestly very simple. These two boys are on a field trip with their school to like a a closed down prison jail place that has become a museum.
Okay.
And they encounter the ghost of a prisoner there who they think is just an actor.
Okay.
And it's all nonsense, whatever. They don't believe any of this. And when the ghost says, open the cell and let me out, they do. The prisoner escapes. He's trying to go and find his treasure that he had hidden somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
This ghost is actually not a bad guy. He was sent to prison for something very small. I think it was petty theft or something like that. And he was trying to get back to his daughter, but he never managed to. When he pulled off his escape act, he was going through the ventilation, but the ventilation shrunk down to a certain point to where he couldn't get through. He got stuck. He wound up dying in there. No one noticed for some many decades.
Mm-hmm.
And so his skeleton is just still in there, pretty well preserved for however many decades he was up in there. I want to say it was about 50 years or so, because that's a pretty common number that they did. The prisoner's ghost honestly captures these boys in order to try to either have them find his treasure that he was trying to find for himself, or just to find his body so he could be freed. Well, they did the latter. They came collapsing out of the pathway, dental shaft, whatever it is. And his skeleton fell out with them, which freaked them out. And then the ghost appeared and said, thank you for finally getting me out of there. He said, I was just trying to get back to my daughter after all this time, and I haven't been able to. If you'll reach into my shirt pocket there, you can pull out a photo, which they did, which they didn't really want to because he was just gross looking, but they did. And lo and behold, it showed that photo of him. And previously or earlier in the episode, they went to the woman trying to get some genuine information who had, she was looked at as like a nutcase and was constantly getting picked on by the neighborhood kids who heard about the story and went and tried to just be horrible to her and make fun of her for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they went to her to genuinely try to get some information, but because she had been dealing with that for so long, she just scared them off and said, get out of here, get lost. I don't want to deal with this. Leave me alone. Because she was always stuck with a bad reputation of being the daughter of this man, even though he wasn't really that bad of a guy. When they presented the photo to her, that kind of changed things. She was like, oh, you guys are serious. And it wound up being a happy story at the end of it. I don't think I told it very well. I'm not explaining it well at all. No, not at all. That's okay.
You jumped around a little bit.
I did jump around a little bit.
You don't really remember.
I don't remember everything. It's a good story. It doesn't get well talked about, I think, because it's another one of those stories that's kind of similar to some other stories we'd seen in the past already.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good telling of the story. It does a good job, and it was the only time where we ever really saw a haunted jail cell. So it was another one of those. It's a perfect atmosphere.
Yeah.
Just maybe not the best story, but that's a great story in its own right. So, and now we have another one called The Tale of C7. And this one is actually really another sweet little love story.
Okay.
This happens a lot, actually. This one is one where, following a divorce, a mother and her two kids move out to lakeside property, which the mother could only afford because of all the ghost stories surrounding it. Yeah.
As one do.
And the goal is to start up their own business, start up their own little rental property situation where they could rent out boats and such, as well as homes in the actually, it's a pretty good size house next to it.
Mm-hmm.
That also has like its own bar and like party room and all that stuff. So it's a place where you can stay and also
do events
and hold a bunch of events there, as well as some weddings and such. And so that was her goal, was basically start fresh, have her kids also start fresh with her, and run this business. And the only way she was able to afford it was because the property was being touted as being haunted. Well, her son is something of a bit of a mechanical genius, almost, if you will, because they find this old jukebox that's all run down, and he manages to actually get it all fixed up and running and doing its thing.
Mm-hmm.
And was cycling through several of the songs, and when he landed on C7, it was a song called Last Dance.
Mm-hmm.
And this girl appears behind him, scaring the ever-living crap out of him, and then he jumps back, accidentally presses another one of the buttons that changes the song, and so she disappears. He finally, after kind of poking, prodding at his mom to try to get this information so he could find out what was going on, why this was happening, because she didn't want to relent because the younger sister was so young that she didn't want her getting scared, whereas the boy was about a teenage age.
Yeah.
He finally convinces his mom to tell him what's going on. She explains that the only reason she could afford the place was because of the stories that she wasn't really going to sit there and believe too much of or put too much stock into. And so he takes that information. He kind of figures out, okay, so what you are wanting, this ghost girl, is what you are wanting is for this song to be played. And what he finds out from his mom is that this girl was waiting for her her boyfriend, whatever, to come back from the war. He had gone off to go fight in the war. This is probably World War II era, judging by the way they were dressed.
Okay.
And he didn't make it. He did not survive. He died. And so she was just left waiting until she would just, I guess, die of natural causes or a broken heart. Who knows? They didn't explain that. It didn't matter. And what her ghost wanted was just to finally be able to play the last dance, to get to dance with her long lost love, which once he does that, an entire scene starts playing out and he's basically transported into the past and watches everything unfold. And as she comes out and sees all her family, she said, is he here? Is he there? He comes coming through the door. And they finally dance their last dance, and then they run off. But before they do, she turns around and she tells him thank you.
Okay.
For finally allowing them to get together after all this time. That closes everything out. He goes back into just his current world, having seen all this stuff unfold. And the ghost story is ended there, and then they just take care of getting everything fixed up so that they can start running this business. The only thing I don't like about this episode is, for whatever reason, the ghost girl is also got some sort of mesmerizing sort of power or something that hypnotizes the little girl to try to go out there into the middle of the ocean.
For what reason?
Exactly. It wasn't explained.
Okay, because my thing would be if you were trying to hypnotize the boy to basically take the place of your lost lover or something. But why would you? And why is she? So you basically, when he died, you drowned yourself. Is what I'm getting at.
Maybe. I'm not entirely sure. That sounds plausible, but because that whole hypnotizing thing was never explained and wasn't put in good detail.
Yeah, what was the reason?
It was unnecessary.
It would have made more sense if you tried to hypnotize the boy.
Yeah.
So that he basically would take the place of your lover or whoever.
Yeah.
So you could dance with him or something.
Well, whatever the case, the episode is for the most part really good. It's just that one part that is like, that wasn't necessary and you could have cut that. That was kind of one of those things where I think they had something else planned there. And then they cut everything else around it that was supposed to be part of it to make it shorter. And as a result, you had these couple of stray points that did nothing and went nowhere.
Okay.
Other than that, the episode is really good.
Yeah.
And then we got...
It's like they were trying to make it be like a villain for 1 second and thought better of like, man, let's not do that.
Yeah, I think that's what was going on. And then we've got an episode called The Tale of Badge. And it's called such because the character that appears as the villain in this looks like a badger.
I don't think it was like, is it a badger?
Yeah. Well, he looks like the Grinch in badger form.
Oh.
Yeah, they did that kind of makeup like just imagine that for a second. Like the Grinch from The Grinch with Jim Carrey in it. Mm-hmm. Think that, but then as a badger. Mm-hmm. And this was before The Grinch was released, of course. So
yeah.
But the makeup is so similar in appearance with what they were doing. Like, he made for a very effective jump scare in his introduction. The episode itself is really not great, but the villain itself is interesting. What's weird is that basically what we have going on here is a familial lineage where passed down from grandmother to granddaughter and so forth and so on for all eternity. The key of a flute, some magical or some specific notes, particularly BADGE. Yeah. Being played will keep this demon leprechaun, not leprechaun,
badger.
Gremlin. Okay. He's a gremlin. He's a gremlin that looks like a badger. Encased in some kind of a mystical crystal thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a weird episode. There's really no explaining it. It's weird. The only reason I have it on here is because the makeup is so good, honestly.
Okay.
That's really it. But the idea is also there. It's just maybe the execution wasn't. But the goal is to keep him, this gremlin thing, trapped in that crystal. And every time he gets out, which seems that, I guess maybe the hold over him weakens as the previous holder of that magic gets older.
Okay.
I think that's what's going on. So it's intended to be passed down from every other generation to every other generation.
Okay.
And as it gets weaker, then he's able to get out and roam free. And if he can basically kill off this lineage before he gets trapped again, then he's free to cause havoc for all eternity.
Okay, so their job, her family generation, is basically controlling him.
Yep. And that's literally it. That's literally it. And it's actively left on a mild cliffhanger where basically the grandmother's like, well, now that you know and you're the one who is in control of all of this, I have a lot to teach you. And that's where they leave it. I mean, there's...
Why can you teach me this shit before this started happening? So that way I wouldn't be...
I think you had to reach a specific age point, which was probably part of it.
Or to see if you even had to deal with it.
That too, probably. I think really she just had to reach a certain age, and I'm assuming something like 13 to 15 is probably about the age range, which is normal for most of these kinds of stories. So, not a bad episode. Just
it's the wording. Now that it's your problem, I have a lot to teach you. You knew this was coming up. You could have been already teaching me.
Yeah. Well, she tried at the beginning of the episode to actually go ahead and get things rolling, but then the girl's mom, her daughter, whatever, comes in and was freaking out because she had just quit her band out of nowhere. And I don't remember what her reasoning was for quitting the band. I don't think it mattered because it was just one of those passing bits of information.
That needed to, just kind of, you need this to get to this part. A segue, if you will.
Yeah, that was about it. And as a result, the grandmother didn't really get the opportunity to actually take care of talking about this. Yeah. So everything had to happen in the way that it did, where it was just kind of abrupt and, well, there you go.
Yeah, and now she's like, okay, now that you want to listen? Okay.
Yeah, well, now that you know, let's get this going and such. So, again, I put it really on there more so just because the makeup and the actual impressive-ish jump scare that does take place there. I mean, I've seen better jump scares than that, but it's decent for what it is because the makeup is so Grinch-like that it's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, I saw it.
So, and then we've got The Tale of the Vacant Lot, and I put this one on there mostly because it's really something that a lot of others seem to prefer. I wouldn't say it's probably one of the very best episodes, but it's got a good moral behind it. Okay. Basically, what's going on here is that this woman is running a tent that will appear whenever someone is really just wanting something in order to be able to achieve a goal. Like, this girl is interested in a boy, shocking surprise, I know, and she thinks she's not pretty enough, so she's wanting things that'll make her pretty and make her attractive to the boy, and that she can get things in order to help push things along, like concert tickets and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the woman with the tent appears and says, I can provide you with this, but you have to give me something in return. It can be something that you don't particularly think is all that important. Mm-hmm. Well, what she winds up taking is the girl's beauty, both inner and outer.
Okay.
So she starts...
So the girl didn't get to choose what she took? She said, I'm going to take something?
Well, she said she didn't care. It was something that she didn't care about, that she didn't think was important.
And so she said, you can take my looks?
No. She just agreed to it without knowing what was being taken.
Oh, she said, I don't care what you take.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
It could be something... Well, she takes the girl's beauty gradually, and that goes both inner and outer, and as a result, she's getting physically uglier, while at the same time also will just get angry out of nowhere and just yell at somebody if they confront her about the tiniest things. Mm-hmm. Well, it all comes to a head when she says to the woman, I don't want any of this. Take it back. I'm done. I don't want this. And originally what the woman had wanted was a ring that the girl was wearing that was a heirloom from her grandfather. Mm-hmm. And so she says, you know what? You can have it. And so she takes it. But what happens then is that everything implodes on the woman because she wanted too much. And so the ring falls to the ground.
Yeah, because you already took her beauty and also her.
Yeah. Well, she was also looking to basically have an exchange where she would finally be freed from the tent. In exchange, the girl would take her place.
Okay.
But when she wanted too much and she got that ring, her greed just became such that it was so overwhelming that she was paid back in full.
Okay.
Yeah. So moving on, The Tale of the Night Shift. This is the final episode of season 5, and at the time, the series finale episode. And it's a vampire story where a bunch of teenagers are working as volunteers at night. I don't know how this is working out. It's a teen story, so yeah. Are working at night at a children's hospital as volunteers, and the janitor boy signs for what he thinks is supposed to be some sort of a well pump, but instead it winds up being the casket of a vampire. The vampire gets in, poses as a Candy Striper type of character, which I think is what they were going for, was a Candy Striper situation, you know, the volunteers. Mm-hmm. And is all the while sucking the blood out of all of these people, which turns the boy into a vampire and kind of zombifying a lot of the other characters where they're just husks, if you will. And it's basically just using the hospital to get as much blood as possible. The vampire gets... The long and short of this story is that posing as a Candy Striper type of character, the vampire almost gets everybody, but then chasing one of the other characters up to the very roof gets turned around just enough to where they fall off of the ledge of the hospital, and having caught fire from something else just prior to, I don't remember how they caught fire, because it wasn't a sunrise situation. I know that much. It was the middle of the night. Had caught fire. I don't remember how, and as a result went collapsing down and dying, and then everyone got their livelihood back and went back to normal. Everything was back to the way it was.
So the boy that got turned into a vampire died?
No, the boy that got turned into a vampire got turned back to normal. It was the vampire who was posing as a Candy Striper girl who died.
Okay.
So everyone else survived, and it made for a great finale at the end.
Yeah.
So, wow, that was a lot.
It was.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's about it. Honestly, there's not a whole lot more to it at this time. We might tackle season 6 and 7 in the future. I don't know when that might be. So, yeah. Hope you all enjoyed that. It's a good, fun mess, I hope. At least I hope you found a few episodes in all that talking that you're going to be willing to watch. I think you should, especially since you do have such easy access to it by having the ability to watch the first 7 seasons on YouTube without issue, because they do have their own official YouTube channel. So go for it and have some fun, because it's a phenomenal series.
Yeah. Bye!
Bye!